What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And if we seem a little giddy, I think we have a good reason for that. We have Neal Smith from the original Alice Cooper band on the Talk Louder podcast, the drummer on all those great classic hits: School's Out, Is It My Body, Under My Wheels, No More Mr. Nice Guy, $1 Billion Babies. I mean, it goes on and on. Desperado. I mean, wow.
18.
Yeah, 18. I see he's got so many, I missed the biggest one of all. But yeah, the drummer that played on all those songs that you still hear on the radio today, a band that set the tone and probably the benchmark by which all other cool bands are going to be measured. Not only were they a great sounding band, they were a great looking band. They just reeked of attitude and swagger. And just an honor to have him on the show today, because he obviously is a huge influence on myself and Jason, and hopefully any other self-respecting rock and roll fan out there. What'd you think, man? He was great.
Neal Smith of the Alice Cooper group was just on our show.
Crazy.
Yeah, of course we're giddy. Of course we're strange feeling right now. That was amazing. And you know what? He was like regular dude.
Yeah, very cool, very down to earth. So many great stories.
Love it.
We couldn't not talk about Alice Cooper, of course, and we give you all kinds of great questions and answers related to that subject. But one of the reasons he's here today is he's got a new album out called Killsmith Goes West. And Neal has been doing these Killsmith records for a number of years now. This is either the fourth or fifth. Fourth. So it's an ongoing series, if you will, under the Killsmith theme. The latest album is called Killsmith Goes West, and on it, it's sort of an ode to his fascination with the Wild West and the cowboy lifestyle and the long haul trucker lifestyle and Desperado, if you will.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Desperado when we started in on the Killsmith stuff.
Yeah,
because it fits that whole thing. So that's happening throughout the Alice years as well, I think. So
yeah, I didn't really think about it, but if you do, there is some of that Wild West. I think with Alice, the horror theme is so in your face that you kind of forget some of the more subtle influences. And a song like Desperado, of course, is the whole, as you like to say, lonesome cowboy thing.
Yep.
And this new album, Killsmith Goes West, is a lot of that. A lot of twang, a lot of hard boogie, a lot of Western swing. It's really cool stuff. It shows that Neal is much more than a drummer.
Yeah, we didn't even get into all of the instruments that he plays, but he's playing guitar. He's probably playing bass. He did mention some of the players that he had on his records. I don't recall their names. Sorry about that. But you can get the Killsmith records from Neal's website. Do you have that?
Right.
Name?
Yeah, nealsmithrocks.com. And it's Neal with an A, we should point out. Neal. Neal Smith
it's just
Rocks.
by, when I was setting up the folders to record this episode, I didn't even flinch. I spelled Neal Smith, Neal. I spelled it that. And I had to wait a minute. So I checked myself, right? And I just leaned back and I went, I know that I'm right because I have read the liner notes for all of those Alice records since birth.
Right, exactly.
So I know how to spell Neal Smith's fucking name.
Right.
It's
right.
not to be confused with other drummers named Neal.
Right. There are other drummers
I know how to spell those too.
I didn't know there was other drummers named Neal.
Neil
I
Peart.
digress.
Neil Peart, of course. Yeah,
I know I'm
yeah.
being
It was
stupid.
silly. You're being silly, Dave.
Yeah. See, I told you we were giddy today. Neal Smith, what a treat. What a really cool guy, man. He was so gracious with his time and so willing to talk and answer questions.
I
And
have a question for you.
yeah,
I have a question for you. So
yes.
were you, and I think inquiring minds, listeners and watchers of the Talk Louder podcast would even like to know, because, how did you, I know how you reacted. Tell us how you reacted when I sort of like told you, hey, I think we're having Neal Smith from Alice Cooper Group on our show. What was your reaction?
I think the first word was holy, and then I'll let you guess the second
Yeah.
word.
Well, yeah. What
Yeah.
about what kind of what do we owe Mr. Paul Unger?
Yes, we should put that check in the mail. Paul Unger is responsible for hooking us up with Neal Smith. If we're giving credit where credit is due, and we should.
So this is a thing where Paul Unger is an old friend of mine, and now yours, Dave, and he's actually been a guest on our show. He has his own podcast. He put it this way: it's much like Metal Dave here. If Paul Unger and Metal Dave or Metal Dave are a fan of your band, you are a lucky band. Because Paul and Dave,
'Cause we won't shut up about you.
the kind of people that will roll down the window in the car and at midnight yell with the music cranked up all the way, yell, "Hey, y'all need to check these fucking guys out." You wear it on your sleeve and you tell people about it.
Yeah.
Until they finally listen, and if they like it, you win. It's like a one-man street team, and Paul Unger is kind of like that. So I get a message. It was probably an email from Paul saying, "Hey, do you want Neal Smith on the Talk Louder podcast?" Yes.
Yes.
It was
Twice.
hard to just. How many times do I have to say yes as I jump up and down? Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, and Paul has worked with Ryan Roxy and more current versions of the Alice Cooper band, but he as obviously has ties with the old band because he's such a huge Coop fan.
Yeah.
So he's in with those guys, and it's like, I don't know how or what, but it's just because Paul Unger is rock and roll. He loves rock and roll, and thank you, Paul Unger, for helping spread the word of Talk Louder podcast, as well as just our well-being to the world. Thank you, because holy shit, we just had Neal Smith from the Alice Cooper Group here on the Talk Louder podcast.
Thanks for joining us, Neal. Where are you currently sitting?
We're in my Connecticut home, in Connecticut here.
Okay, yeah. When you said in your email that you were Eastern time, I thought, wait a minute, I thought he was in Arizona.
Well, I am the first part of the year, and then most of the year I'm in Connecticut. In the summer I'm in Finland, so I'm all over the place.
Oh,
right.
Wow. Nice.
All right.
Nice. You kind of go wherever the weather's good then.
I try to do that. I saw when I was a kid in high school, I was a big surf fan, and and of course then the English invasion happened, the British invasion. But there was a great movie. It's called The Endless Summer, and the surfers went all around the world all the time to try to keep it simple so they could surf. And I thought, well, that was a pretty good motto. And then later on, the older I got and lived in Arizona, I lived in Connecticut here. The storms in 2013, 14, and 15 were just terrible in the wintertime. And so that's time to think about spending more time out in Arizona, my old hangout. So
Yeah.
got a place there for the winter, and that's where we go for the first part of the year. And usually it's great, a little colder than what you guys experience too, a little colder than normal in Texas there too.
Yeah, there's been the past couple of winters have been quite strange.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
haven't
to say
seen
the least.
anything like that in my lifetime, I don't think. I mean, we've had some crazy cold weather in Texas. And, then this time of year rolls around and we're in for a heat wave that'll last about 8 months.
Yeah.
We try not to complain too much.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
150 days of 100 degrees.
Yeah.
That even sounds worse than Phoenix, but Phoenix is pretty bad though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a cliche around here, and it might be in Phoenix as well, but it's the humidity that kills you in Texas. The heat in Phoenix, I think, is drier, but you step outside in Texas and it can be 92, 95 degrees, but it feels like you just walked into a furnace.
Well, it's the same thing in Connecticut here. By the time it gets into the 90s, I always say I can play golf in the 90s and the hundreds in Arizona, but once it hits 90 degrees in Connecticut, there's no way I can play 18 holes of golf.
Wow.
Speaking of golf, who's the better golfer, you or Alice?
Alice is pretty damn good. I've had my moments. I've had 2 hole-in-ones since he got me hooked on the game in the early 90s. I was a late bloomer. He started pretty early, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But I started late. But he gave me my first set of clubs, and I still have them. And that's one reason. I mean, here in Connecticut, I live on a golf course, and when we go to Arizona, they're like, the closest one is like 5 minutes from my house there, but they're all over the place out there. So he's pretty good. We get a chance to play once in a while, but I'll never forgive him for getting me into golf, because it's an addiction of its own, but I love it. It's a great way to get a little bit of exercise. I have a golf cart. I mean, I drive around a golf cart, so I don't get much exercise. But you're out there for 4 hours. You're swinging the club, getting some fresh air, and getting out your inhibitions. And
and it's expensive from what I understand. Not that I would know, but
yeah, it can get expensive. You can spend a lot of money on golf. I mean, luckily, Alice gives me a lot of clubs. I have friends that give me clubs, but still, I have a house all winter long. Basically, it's to play golf and hang out with Mike Bruce and Alice in Arizona. So,
Right.
it can get expensive, but you have to have the time to do it too. A lot of people that would love to play, it takes 4 hours out of the day. For me, I'm not. Alice gets up crack of dawn and plays. He'll play 9, 18 holes, but I've done it with him a couple of times. Not for me. I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
And never really have been. Kind of, that was the way it was back in the day with the band. But now I'm 11:30 is a good time to tee off, and then you have the rest of the day. Have a couple of beers and have dinner. So that's a good day.
That sounds like a little more rock and roll to me than that getting up early. Alice, what are you doing to me? How many times have you said that in your lifetime? Alice, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
He's probably said that more about me than I've said it about him.
Oh, shit.
I was pretty much a big pain in the ass, but
well, let me get this out of the way. I mean, we're both big fans, and
big.
Your drumming kind of, in my opinion, set a bar for a lot of, not just still to this day, but at the time, set the bar pretty high for. Let me move forward. I mean, I love what you do. We love what you do. Let me just move out of that fanboy thing for a second and say, do you think that early Alice stuff, and I'm talking probably even Easy Action and Pretties for You, that early, like your first jump, was maybe considered, whether it had to do with maybe Frank Zappa, was there with you guys, and being an influencer or not, do you feel like it was maybe progressive rock on top of your show?
It was very progressive. Nobody was doing what we were doing at the time, and we were inspired by electronic music, even more than Pink Floyd. Being inspired by them. I mean, we're very aware of them, and we liked Pink Floyd. But I mean, there was our biggest early influences were the bands that, Alice, before I, joined the band and we changed the name to Alice Cooper when it was the Spiders Into the Nest. I mean, they're very much into the English sound. I mean, there was not too many people know that, but back in the early to mid '60s, the Phoenix area was a testing ground for a lot of the English music that was coming over. So we were aware of a lot of the bands that never made it, but they were great bands, but they just didn't become like the Beatles, the Stones, or the Yardbirds, or the Who. So we got bombarded by all that great music, and some of it was pretty avant-garde. Even Jeff Lynne's early band, The Move, with A Night of Fear. I mean, that was a great song. We were very aware of it, and we've talked about that song and that band, The Move, other places in the country. They have no idea who they are. Yeah. So I mean, that's just a prime example of what I'm talking about. But so we were always on top of that, the theatrics and trying to do something different. But we did the same thing with the music. When I met the guys and got to be good friends with them in 66 to 67, we went to Glendale Community College in the Phoenix area. I was in a band called the Holy Grail. We were like from Tempe, like the ASU town, but we were more like a San Francisco band, and so we went to Frisco. We played, we were playing Paul Butterfield Blues Band. We actually played a couple of Frank Zappa songs too, the Mothers, "Help I'm a Rock." We played that song, and so I wasn't a big fan of Frank's. I mean, I was so into Jimi Hendrix, so into Jeff Beck, so into Pete Townsend, and I knew that Frank Zappa was an amazing guitar player, an amazing arranger, arranger in his music. So respected that, but we were just, five crazy kids from Phoenix, and drink a little beer, smoke a little pot, and try to come up with some crazy. And Glenn was a very innovative guitar player.
Yes,
I mean, he was like myself. He started playing at an earlier age, and so did I. And we're both from Akron, Ohio. So when we started writing the songs, and I always say that Pretty's Few and Easy Accent were really Naz songs. Love It to Death, finally, we found our own niche. We found our own producer, and that was really Alice Cooper. But the early, to say it's progressive, having songs that are like 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, just to make a statement. It was more like an art form. We all majored in art when we were in school. And I think we took that into the music, not only on stage, but also in the arrangements. Just try to do something completely different that nobody ever heard. We had a feeling deep inside of us, said, man, when the Beatles hear Pretty's for You, they're going to get it. They're going to really understand us, and it's going to be a million seller. So, everybody says, well, how did you feel when you finally became stars? We thought we were stars the minute we recorded with Frank. And Frank didn't really influence our music too much because we recorded Pretty's Few exactly like we wrote it. There was not one bit of arrangement help.
His
Love It to Death,
was...
Bob Ezrin came in and he helped us. Jack Richardson came in from Nimbus 9, helped us with arrangements. But Frank just let it rip. Whatever you guys are doing, man, when they're recording.
Was Frank's involvement more managerial, like introductions, like, hey, y'all should record these guys, or hey, these guys are my friends, or what was it that Frank introduced?
No, he was really, he was the, technically the producer of the first album.
Okay, right.
But between him, he wasn't feeling well. I don't know if he had the flu or if he had a cold. And also, Jefferson Airplane were recording the studio next to us, and they gave us a ceremonial joint that we smoked before we went in the studio with Frank. And Frank, when we came in, he saw us, he was pissed off because he knew we were stoned. Ooh. And he kind of left between not feeling good to begin with and, not happy that we were stoned because he was totally straight, no drugs or anything.
Yeah.
So he left the studio, and was it Ian, the keyboard player in his band? I think that's his name, Ian, with the Mothers. He stayed in the studio and sort of produced it, arranged it for us. And,
Okay.
we did that album, basically was, recording the songs live in the album. So Frank got us in our foot in the door. We played some larger venues with him because we were just playing really concerts. We were the house band at the Cheetah. Of course, that was a big club in Santa Monica back in the 60s. So they had, huge audiences. They had the Doors played, Janis Joplin played, Pink Floyd played there. So a lot of big bands played there, and they were, but it wasn't. It was like almost Santa Monica's version of the Bill Graham's theaters in on the West Coast and on the East Coast. They were big theater venues. They weren't concert venues like Madison Square Garden or anything. But when we played the Shrine Auditorium first time with Frank, that was a big venue. And then we went up a West Coast concert all the way into Canada. And those were some like universities. They had their big auditoriums.
Yeah.
And they were packed with Zappa fans. So that's what he really helped break us, where nobody else would touch us in the whole record. Believe me, everybody in the record industry knew about us, and nobody liked us, and nobody liked the music. So it was an uphill battle for us all the way.
Well, the helping hand of Frank Zappa is what is impressive to me, that he was kind of dragging you guys around gleefully, happily, and being a big brother kind of a thing. It's impressive to think about, the mid 60s when Beatlemania, which, the story you just told is incredible, and it's awesome to hear your perspective. The back to the music and the songwriting and the arranging and stuff. Was Ezrin involved with the Killer record? He was. Is that right?
Bob was. Bob was involved in all of our records of with Warner Brothers.
Okay, so Halo of Flies is like, isn't that like an 8-minute song?
Yeah, it's about a 7-8 minute song. It was bits and pieces. Actually, you go back to the video of the rock and roll revival in Toronto in '69 when he's doing a solo. Everybody soloed in the song in that particular song.
Yeah.
That wasn't Halo of Flies. That was a song that we called Animal Pajamas, which was a spin-off of Lay Down and Die Goodbye off the Easy Action album, which was just that was a big, 10, 11, 12-minute jam freak out on stage. Yeah. And Alice actually in that video, he played lead watermelon with a hammer, and he takes a watermelon, smashes the hell out of it on stage, right along with my drum solo. So I had Alice on hammer and watermelon accompaniment.
That's pre-Gallagher, man.
So
awesome.
We're kind of jumping all around here, and I appreciate you indulging us on the Alice Cooper stuff, because I'd love to go back to it. But I do want to talk a little bit about your Killsmith Goes West album. That's your brand new release.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's like the 4th or 5th Killsmith album.
It's a 4th.
Okay, so tell us real quick, what is the character or the theme of Killsmith that continues through the last four albums now?
Well, Killsmith was when we were in Detroit and in Pontiac, and that's when we got together with Bob Ezrin in 1970, and we started recording Love It to Death. That was released in '71, and later in '71, Killer, what we just talked about, was released. But when we were literally on the road all of 1969 and half of 1970 before we settled down in the Detroit area. And heavy metal was not a term then. And we used to call, and hard rock, the music was starting to get even, definitely harder than hard rock like the Stones or Jimi Hendrix or the Who. And we called it kill rock. we called it Kill Rock. And then not only my name being Smith, but then when I came up with the project, because I wanted a real metal project, the first two Killsmith albums, Sexual Savior and Killsmith 2, they're, probably the most heavy metal sort of music I've ever played. And I played a lot of guitar on that as well and wrote the songs. So I just, fused the two, like the Kill Rock that we had then with Killsmith being like a person that created that kind of music without saying metal. So that's where the name originated from. So Killsmith is just like, it's like a blacksmith that, he makes things out of iron, and a killsmith is somebody that makes, music out of really hard rock. And so that's where the term came from, and nobody would understand what I'm talking about. But it was a term that we came up. We said, man, that's really. I mean, killer was a big term back then. Something was awesome, right. And in Detroit it was always killer, and it still is. I think to this day in many many areas. But so I wanted to have a real. The one thing that bothered me about the Alice Cooper image over the years, and even with inducted in the Hall of Fame, we lost that dangerous edge, and I am not comfortable on the other side, where it's really safe and the music is really commercial. So I always have to have that edge no matter what I do. And then the third album was Killsmith and the Green Fire Empire, which I made into like what I call the last rock opera. Still really heavy, but it told a story. And Killsmith in that instance was a person. He's like an Army veteran, but he was a special, specialist, and he was a marksman. And so, and then the story is based around that. And he can be Arnold Schwarzenegger or any of the the movie heroes that we've seen over the last 20, 30 years.
Right.
And so in this particular one, I just had, because I really started writing. Well, I mean, I've been writing. We've been, even on the Alice Cooper albums, I always had songs using my name on the songs as well as Michael and Dennis's. Although Michael was our major contributor, he was really the songwriter of the band. But in the 80s, after I had a bad divorce, I wrote a song called Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time. And it was about, going through a divorce and, the things that someone would feel that, maybe we'll get back together, maybe we won't. And then when you finally realize it, what the hell, it's a new life, and make the most of it. And sort of a celebration of your freedom at that time. And it was called around, Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time, drinking, too much coffee and too much beer. And so that was the very first one. And I just shelved it. And over time, other songs were put together. That was in the 80s, a couple more. And of course, with our background from Arizona and out west, like I always say, between Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, there were a lot of rowdy people there and rowdy history. Let's not kid ourselves. And the last of the 48 states was Arizona. So two big things happened in 1912. Arizona was made a state, the last one of the Great 48. And then the Titanic sank. So historically, it was a great time. The last wild territory was Arizona, and we sort of celebrated that with Raped in Freezing, and the $1 Billion Baby album talked about the area we were from, and then also on the Killer album Desperado. Yeah. So really a salute out to Arizona, the Phoenix area, the great history, the crazy history. And so I wanted to even, once I had these songs laying around, I started, this is before the pandemic, really said, okay, I never know what I'm going to do for the next thing. And when I do the Killsmith projects, but I put together 12, 13, 14 songs. And then I noticed some of them, they were all heading in a direction that I don't want to do country, and I'm a song person. It's not. I'm not a fan of a lot of genres of music, but if a song is a great song, it shines through no matter what.
Definitely.
It can be a theme song from a movie. It can be hip hop. It can be rap. It can be country. It can be Western. It could be rock. It could be swing. My mother was a big Glenn Miller fan in the swing era. She actually played trombone and in a marching band. So music's always been around me, and I was exposed to a lot of live music when I lived in the Midwest, and so I'm very aware of it. I got into rock like a lot of baby boomers did in the 50s and 60s, but I was a song person. So these started to gravitate toward that feel. And because I spent so much time in Arizona, it's not really out of the realm of possibility to just kind of, think about that. Why I went there. I have a song called Big Wheels Rolling West about a truck driver. His big dream is to move out west, to move to Arizona, and his 18-wheeler is going to one of these days take him there. So just the many different ways you can talk about the West and the influences, whether it's in the 1800s, the 1930s, in the Depression, and because I think of them or fantasize like if Jesus was a gunfighter.
Yeah.
I mean, I take situations, take people out of history and put them in different times, and I'm not being sacrilegious. I'm just being creative,
Sure.
and I think that that's kind of fun for me to do it, and you see some similarities between the biblical Jesus and it's almost like Wyatt Earp. But Wyatt Earp, because I love Tombstone, it's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And so to take these characters and to take these stories, I love the great storytellers. Frankie Lane. I mean, Rawhide, Big Bad John, Jimmy Dean, all the storytelling novelty songs from the 50s and the early 60s. And have those as inspirations when I tell a story. I really want it to be visual. I really visualize songs when I write them, and my biggest challenge is, and it's fun for me to really work hard to almost have it a visual while you're listening to the song.
Yeah.
And it really went into that direction, and I just said simply, now, Killsmith is singing these songs, and now it's all Killsmith Goes West. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did, and I cut some of the songs out, but it worked fine. I have 10 songs I'm real happy with that fit the album. They had great response, great reviews, great fans. Some of the fans, of course. Country. I think it's more Western than country,
Right.
Because of just my approach to it. A couple
Right.
great guitar. Arlen Roth, who was a great country player, was lucky enough to get him on some tunes. The fiddle player Gary, he's amazing, and he played on a Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time, the song I mentioned a few minutes ago. So,
Yeah.
It's sort of. After a while, when you have a vision, the songs sort of write themselves.
Definitely.
Your work is to hone them and have each one. It's like Tattooed Cowgirl, which that was a fun one to write, and another Thelma and Louise kind of character, and a real rowdy. I mean, she could be right off Yellowstone. She could be right out of the show Alice in the Old Days, and then Jukebox Rose is another one. She actually kills a guy in Mexico. So these characters come alive for me, and I just try to convey that through the songs.
It's interesting that the points that you just made, because listening to the songs, I get all of that. I get this very cinematic storyteller kind of vibe. I can visualize the lyrics as they're coming through the speakers, and the going west thing. I totally see that too. There's a lot of the sound sonically. The album has a lot of There's twang, there's hard boogie, there's western swing, there's some kind of grindy ZZ Top sort of stuff a little bit. There's a lot of
ZZ Top. We did the last tour in the United States, and ZZ Top opened for us on the holiday tour, the $1 Million Baby holiday tour in '73. Wow. And I went out and watched them a lot. I love that band. And I always say that if there would have been another style of music that I would have been happy in a band, it would have been ZZ Top. They're a great band. Love them.
Yeah, yeah.
And if Jesus was a gunfighter, it's kind of my tribute to Dusty in that. Yeah.
Yeah, the song titles are great too. If Jesus Was a Gunfighter, you mentioned Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time. There's another one called Tequila, Tamales, and a Woman. What's Pull It Out Smokin' is one of the more rockin' tunes on the album. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, well, that one actually has a history, and I've been criticized with all the gun tragedies, which I think are terrible, as everyone does, across the country and actually in some other countries occasionally too. But we did have, and this is the cutting edge of Alice Cooper back in the day, we actually had a bodyguard on tour with us during the $1 Billion Babies tour, because there had been threats against the band. There were actually some bomb threats somewhere. There were personal threats against us, and we had a bodyguard that traveled with us, and he was actually ex-military, and I would talk to him a lot and hang out with him, and the one phrase that, when you have somebody that's an expert in weapons and is ex-military and now is a bodyguard, how and when do you know when the time is right to protect the people that you're protecting? Mm-hmm. And he said there's just one rule that he abides by, that if he has to pull it out smoking. Mm-hmm. And that always stuck with me. And that's where, if the threat is real, because if you pull it out, and anybody that knows firearms, if you pull it out and it's not smoking, somebody's going to pull it out, and it will be. Yeah. So, and that's where it gets really a gray area that's not, and I feel terrible. I love law enforcement. I have relatives in law enforcement and in military, and I respect them immensely. They're the cutting edge of keeping society, civilized. Yeah. And a lot of the criticism, unfortunately, puts them in a rough spot. And but when your life's on the line, there's only one thing to do, is pull it out smoking. So I use that phrase. But there's also there's a little bit of sexual connotations in there. I was wondering. So I'm just saying the inspiration versus the reality of the double entendre lyrics. So, yeah. But again, that's Killsmith, keeping it kind of on the sexual edge, keeping it heavy, and no, that'll always be, no matter what kind of music or what style direction I go in. There'll always be the really, really heavy metal songs, and that song is that's probably the heaviest one on the album. Yeah, Evil Wind is also a heavy rocker, but yeah, Pull It Out Smoking is a great one.
Yeah, absolutely. The album is called Killsmith Goes West. It's available at Neal's website. It's nealsmithrocks.com. Is that correct? There.
Yeah, that's it. There's it is right there.
Yeah, there.
You can see
right there. Yeah. So let's go back for a moment, because I was, doing my homework knowing that I was going to talk to you today, and I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, but it dawned on me that I don't know that I realized, or I had forgotten, that you guys put out a string of 5 classic albums between 71 and 73. That's like basically 2.5 years you put out 5 albums that are considered classics. Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, and Muscle of Love. Who can say that? Now, I know that back in those days, bands did. It wasn't unusual for bands to put out a couple records a year.
Yeah, that's kind of normal.
But I will say, I don't know that anybody, at least in my catalog, of course, I'm a hard rock guy, but you put out 5 albums, consecutive albums, that are considered classics. And you can argue that Kiss put out albums at the same pace, Black Sabbath at the same pace, Aerosmith at the same pace. but really those records they weren't successes out of the box. And I think that your 5 albums, beginning with Love It to Death, are landmark records. And I can't believe that you were able to put them out so quickly while you're touring in between. Tell us about the pace as far as the writing and the touring and how you're cranking these things out. I know you had youth on your side at that time.
It was a crazy work ethic too.
That's just nuts.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify. Yes, classics, but I also like to say platinum as well. But
Yes.
it ain't bragging if it's true.
There was that element that inspired us too. But no, I love to talk about this. And I mean, there's 2 things that we don't talk about too much: is Dennis and me as rhythm section, and the work ethic of the band. And that's what I loved about the band. When I joined them, I knew how hard they worked, and they were all writing their songs. I said, Holy Grail that I was with went to San Francisco. We're still doing cover material, great songs, but cover material. Well, by that time, the Nas, when they left Phoenix, they were doing all original stuff. And so when I ended up living with them after my band broke up in Santa Monica, and John, their drummer, moved back to Phoenix, and they asked me to join the band. And because Glenn and I were really close friends. I was close with Michael too, but Glenn and I both from Akron, Ohio. But as you said, and I can't stress that enough, the work ethic of the band and my work ethic just meshed, because it's like nothing was going to stop us. Every single day we were rehearsing, we were traveling, we were playing, or we were recording every single day, 24/7. That's why when we finally in 1974 decided to take the year off, it was well worth it to do it rest-wise. Unfortunately, the band didn't get back together, but the songs were coming out like crazy. And I also want to point out another cool thing. Somebody had just done a great review about the Killer album, and noticing the fact they called it the music in the band was totally organic. And I thought, man, that is a great way to put it, because no corporate entity ever told the band, Alice Cooper, what to do. Bob came in and he helped mold our songs and added some wonderful arrangements, sweetening, like with I Love the Dead with the orchestration and other songs too. But Michael, all the songwriting changed, because they said, well, between Easy Action and Pretty's for You, Easy Action and Love It to Death, what happened? It's a natural evolution. I mean, look at all the Beatles albums, how they changed over time from one album to another. As a songwriter, we would just start, once we had the freedom to do it, don't even think about it. The songs were just flowing. And luckily we had management that would keep up with us and, keep the gigs coming. We're writing songs on the road. Under My Wheels on Killer.
Was it Shep Gordon that came in at a certain time that sort of like...
Yeah, Shep came in right in 68.
Perfect timing.
When Zappa wanted to, well, it's an accident, but it's not an accident. Zappa wanted to sign us, but we didn't want Herbie Cohen and Frank to manage the band. Herbie Cohen's Frank's manager. We knew that the one thing that in all the very successful bands coming out of England, every band, the Beatles had their manager, the Stones had their manager, Bob Dylan had their all the big bands had their own manager that they were number one with, and that's what we wanted. In the meantime, Cindy, my sister, who was Dennis Dunaway's wife, she worked at a boutique in Hollywood, and these guys from New York, these hip-looking guys, come in a couple times. Cindy finally introduces herself, talks to them, and asks them, we know what they did for a living. They said, we're from New York, and we're here to find a band to manage. She goes, well, my brother Neal's in a band called Alice Cooper, and Frank Zappa wants to record them. And that's how it started. Wow. It was my sister that met. It wasn't Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Those are stories that I think that the truth is always weirder than anything else. And the fact that they came into that store where Cindy worked She lived in Dallas at the time. She and my mom moved from Phoenix to Dallas, and Cindy wanted to be. We were always very close. There's only like 18 months between us, so she moved to L.A. so we could be close. We lived in Topanga Canyon, and that's what happened. Shep had a partner, Joe Greenberg, so Shep Gordon and Joe Greenberg came to see us, and boom, that was the next step. We had the record company. Now we needed managers, our own managers, to manage Alice Cooper, and then the next step after Easy Action, after the first two albums, was to finally get our own producer, and that was Bob Ezrin. So all of that, along with the work ethic, we were really a machine by that time.
Oh yeah.
And when we came up with the name Alice Cooper, which did come up from a Ouija board, I was there that night, and
it did or didn't?
No, it did.
Did
No,
okay, that's what I thought.
I was there because that same story happened to me as well as to Vince. But it didn't say Alice for me; it was another name. But that's another story. But so once we were rolling, it was a machine. I mean, Michael was writing songs, and Michael and I would go down in the barn in Pontiac, and that's where we worked out "Love It to Death" and "Killer." And he come up with these songs, and I'm just like, because first of all, he's got the melody, and he'll sit down, and he starts playing "Continent Dream." I go, holy shit. This song's just got better and better, it drive me nervous. I go, this is great for flams. And I mean, they just wrote themselves. It was all just happening. And Bob and Jack Richardson came in and they just, tweaked everything a little bit. And then before long, we were back over the studio and recording the Killer album.
Wow.
So, and then by then we were doing well enough that we wanted to be close to Shep and Joe, our managers in New York, and we wanted to move to New York, to Westchester, but they said, no, Connecticut has no income tax. You guys are moving to Greenwich, Connecticut. So that's when we got we got it there. It was all for business, not because we wanted to come to Connecticut. But of course, now they have an income tax naturally.
Wow.
But at that time, they did not. That's why we ended up in Greenwich. Yeah, and there's a Killer. That's Kachina. That's my
This
snake.
is your snake on the cover of the Killer record, correct?
Kachina. Yeah.
Kachina.
Yeah.
Tell me, did you Alice is known for bringing the snake on stage. Did you introduce the whole concept of the snake being part of the stage act? It certainly made the album cover.
Yeah, she was, when we did one of the early shows, I think in 1971, down at Pirates World in Florida. I think it's, it's Palm Beach or I'm not quite sure, Miami, where that club was. It was an outdoor venue, and we always had great shows there, huge audiences. And we played one time. I think we would play with bands like the MC5, who we're very familiar with in the Detroit area. But somebody threw a snake on stage, and me being, I always tried to. I had everything from all kinds of pets my whole life, everything from lizards and turtles and alligators and snakes. And so somebody threw it on stage, and I didn't want to. I said, "Yeah, this is a great pet for touring." So I had a big makeup case that I put her in, and she traveled with us. And like everybody else, my sister was the dancing tooth. Eventually, everybody that toured with us had to have a job. So, "Isn't My Body," which was kind of a stripper song. It was just nobody said who came up there. She was just part of the crew, and she traveled with me, and I took her on the road, and then we started using her, early on in "Love It to Death," probably almost simultaneously with, the release of the album on "Isn't My Body." Of course, that added another theatrical element, because there were many times over through history, and whether it's the late 1800s or the 1900s, when strippers would have snakes as part of their act. So, Kachina, we had her, and I don't even know how she ended up on the cover. I think we just thought it would be cool to have a snake on the cover. Yeah. And really, literally hundreds of pictures. And the photographer that took the picture, there was one single picture with, guess what? Her tongue sticking out that he got. And I mean, all the rest of them, they're like going back, but that was the perfect one picture. So we say, I mean, this is killer, and we'll put it on there. And then I was, of course, the picture on the back cover. I'm holding my pet snake. So yeah, holding
Right.
him back there.
I like the double entendre. I like because it's sexual and snakes are sexual.
Why is that?
I like the fact that a lot of stage, theatrical rock bands, they'll wear a feather boa, right? Well,
Yeah,
Alice is wearing a boa.
Boa.
It's a boa.
It's not a feather boa; it's a real boa.
Right. And I was the one that used to hunt the birds in the barn in Pontiac so she could eat.
Oh wow!
So did you ever? I always
Wrangler.
I always ask bands that put on a theatrical show and have big production, and there is no greater theatrical band than the early Alice Cooper band. So we're talking about the Snake, which was part of the stage show, and of course the rest of the stage show is legendary with the guillotine and that sort of thing. What was the biggest mishap on stage that you remember?
We call that a Spinal Tap moment.
Yes, tell us.
Where they had the Stonehenge come down. It was this big,
Right.
But it's supposed to be 12 feet tall, not 12 inches. But we had there's probably several. I don't know how much time we have, but
As much as you allow.
one of the big ones was we had played because in our travels, especially in Canada, and they were, being art majors as we were, we would run across a lot of very artistic, people and fans, and a lot of them would come up with ideas. Well, we had this one artist from Toronto, and he had the idea of it, if we played outside, to have this really gigantic pterodactyl right behind me on the drums. And we played, I think it was at Wrigley Field, out in the baseball field.
Mm-hmm.
And so, basically what it was like a giant hang glider that looked like a pterodactyl. It looked like something out of one of the Jurassic Park movies, exactly what it looked like. But we kind of forgot one element, as that Chicago, what's their nickname?
The Windy
City. At any rate, this thing started moving and quivering, and it fell down on top of me.
Oh.
So that was a really, really bad. Nobody got hurt, but it was just incredibly embarrassing. The other one was probably the biggest one that was in front of an audience. Before we decided to go with the guillotine, if I'm not mistaken, it was on the early. It was either the $1 Billion Baby tour or the School's Out tour, but I think it was $1 Billion Babies. But we had the idea of a cannon, and taking the idea from a circus, shooting Alice out of a cannon. And I got to tell you, Alice is very, very, very sane. He seems crazy on stage, but he's very down to earth, very sane. The fact that he would get in this thing was amazing. So Warner Brothers Pops department made it. It was a bigger than life size cannon where Alice could actually get in the barrel and climb down. Meanwhile, this thing is cocked with this giant spring in there. And there was an escape hatch down there where Alice would go down there. But still, this thing is cocked. He would go down there, he would escape, they'd close it back up and put a dummy of Alice in there, just exactly the way he's dressed and everything. And we did this at a test show outside of Detroit. We would do occasionally before we would actually take a big show on the road. And this could have been before the Killer show. But it was one of the shows we tested it out. And when the part of the show that at the end, the finale, when Alice would come flying out of there and go across the stage. Well, if you ever took like a rag doll and you kind of they don't really throw like a paper plane or something, go straight. It kind of came out and just kind of like, it looked terrible. It was the stupidest thing we ever did.
Like a rag doll.
Yeah, it looked like a rag doll, but a really, really big one. And it wasn't cool. If it would have been like Spinal Tap, cool, man, that's one thing, but this was just not cool.
Didn't
So
have any
now,
bones in it.
so no,
No.
it was a boneless person. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a boneless chicken, a boneless person. But so the next idea, because we had 2 nights to work on this. So now, okay, you've got a big cannon, looks like a giant penis. What do? You take soap suds and you fill it up, and Alice goes up and he starts jerking off this giant cannon sitting on it, and the soap suds come out of and because we've used bubbles like Lawrence Welk bubble machines so many times in our shows, it just kind of made sense. 2 kind of bad things with that. When all of this soap is coming out, it's going on the stage.
Oh,
And all of
no.
a sudden, the stage becomes as slippery as ice.
Yeah.
So between that and it just, again, it really, there was no way to really make it work with the song, whatever we were doing. And there's a few others, like when the trapdoor didn't open when Alice was being hung.
Yeah.
And that was he tries to jump up and down on it to break it. And I'm going, Alice, if you can't break it, it's a go. So I think it was just a premature. And then the lightning and the smoke all kind of, and then the skeleton was there hanging somewhere.
Yeah.
But that was a pretty bad moment too. But the one with the soap suds just really, that cannon just lived in our house in Greenwich for a long time, and eventually ended up in a junkyard. But but those were some of the ideas that we had that just there were more, but we actually had more that worked than that didn't. But it's like anything else, trial and error.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier some of your influences on the early stages of the band, and when I listen to your playing, it's interesting to me. It reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite drummers, Bill Ward from Black Sabbath, because he's very jazzy in his approach. He plays in a hard rock, heavy metal band, and you play in a basically a hard rock band that has other nuances to the music. But to me, your playing style is very is jazzy, avant-garde, intricate. Your most iconic.
Swing. Neal can swing.
There's swing in there. Yeah. So maybe your signature drum part is the intro to $1 Billion Babies. What do you remember about coming up with that piece?
Good question. I was going to want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bob wanted me to Rock and Reggie, a friend of ours, friend of Glenn's, that lived with us stayed with us in the Galicia estate many times. He was also a singer-songwriter, still a friend of ours to this day. And he had a song that he came up with when we were putting songs together for the $1 Billion Baby album. And we kind of fooled around with it. We normally wouldn't go outside of our writing sphere of influence, but he was a close friend. It was cool, but it had changed so much that it really wasn't anything like he started. But if you look on the credits on the song, Reggie Vincent's name is on there, Rocklin's name is on there. Mm-hmm. But we had worked out an arrangement, and I was playing it pretty straight like I normally would. But you mentioned my influences. I took 2 years of snare drum, learned all the rudiments, mastered those before I ever even got a set of drums. So I like to call myself a rudiment drummer. And again, flams. I love flams, and they drive me nervous. That's when I played it between hi-hat and snare drum through almost the whole song. And I always loved "Get Off My Cloud." It was a great song by the Stones, and Charlie Watts just played a real simple. Anybody knows the song knows how it goes on the intro of the song. And I wanted to do something, and we hadn't really. I mean, Black Juju, of course, that's a whole theatrical piece itself, starting off with lots of tom-toms. That's a different, that's taking you on a little bit of a musical journey. But this was just going to be a flashy intro and bang into the song. And so I came up with the intro to the song. Bob was not. I mean, he was, he liked it, he thought it was cool, but he said, if you're going to do it, and then what I did to the choruses with that sort of more of a tango kind of a fill, dun, in there, it all worked together really well. And so instead of playing it straight all the way through, I had these little, tempo nuances, feeling nuances that change all the way from the intro. And again, all flams on the beginning, with that intro. And story cut short, I played it perfectly through, and the rest was history. And
Let me
and still to this day, nobody can get the feel of it like when Dennis and I played that song.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
let me jump in and ask like a, well, it's not a technical question. It has to do with I don't want to say credits, but which came first? Was it the lyric, the guitar riff, or was it that drum part, that intro part? Was that, because it kind of sets a, because you think about it for a second, and this is up for argument, friendly argument at that, that, you can or you cannot write a song on a drum kit, because it's not really, you're not playing a scale or a melody. I mean, unless it's an electronic kit, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
but that is almost like a riff, like it's almost like a guitar riff,
Well,
that's almost like can influence your band, your bassist, your guitar, your piano.
But this is the total opposite on this song. We had the song "Generation Landslide" on the Billion Dollar Baby album. Yep. That song was written from what I played on the intro to that song. Mm. Unlike Billion Dollar Babies, the song was written, and then I put, I did my flash to it. I put my parts in it. So the song was written before the intro was there.
Okay.
Alice sometimes says that the intro, I think he's thinking about Generation Landslide, because we were writing the last song for the Billion Dollar Baby album, and which is the same album. So we went from, this is the end of the Schools Out tour in the UK and in Europe. We were staying at the Blake's Hotel in London, and we wanted to get away after the tour to write this last song. We were recording at Morgan Studios in London, and we went down to the Canary Islands, and there was a new hotel that was being built. They hadn't quite finished the top floor, but there were rooms up there, so we went up on the top floor, and that's where we wrote the song. And kind of like all five of us were up there, like one guitar, simple set of drum. I mean, my drum set wasn't simple, but enough that I could play my normal feels, and 4 times across the top. And we were having writer's cramp as a band to write this last song, and as sometimes happened, Michael would go, give me a beat, give me a feel. And swing is a big deal for me too. And Ginger Baker, man, he said it best, and I really got it when he said it. And I think that's what people miss with Halo of Flies. But there's no swing in those songs when other drummers playing. If you play that straight, 2/4 all the way through, you're right on the beat. You've screwed up the whole feel of the song. Right. And again, going back to the classics with Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, they all had the swing. Yes, that's why that's the swing sound. Yeah. But I started playing the intro, boom, dum, boom, 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 bam, boom, to Generation Landslide, and Michael starts strumming the chords. The song was written like in a half an hour, and then we did like a Yardbirds break, the bam, bam, boom, 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 bam, bam. Now Al's playing them out. Always try to get Al to play harp. He's a great harmonica player. Wow. And so that song was written from the standpoint of the drum laying down the feel of it. Billion Dollar Babies, it was an afterthought after the song was written. Wow. So I mean, there's no way in the world. I mean, I love the song, and I wanted to try to do something, like I said, flashy, like Charlie Watts had a little signature on the end of it. Yeah. But since then, it's become like my signature song, the signature song off the album, our only #1 album in the in the charts in 1973, the only #1 album we ever had. Well, so I'm kind of happy about that.
It's really great to hear these stories about. You're telling stories about where you guys were when you were kind of like having this intellectual property form. I love that.
Intellect isn't a word that's used a lot around us, but I appreciate it when it is.
Well, see, at least you're
a lot of things, but that's not usually one of them.
able to have fun with what little.
Let's see, you intellectual ass. No, that doesn't work as well. No, I can see.
as much as you have or have not, respectfully can laugh at yourself as well as others. This is where I want to sort of toot some horns here. I've been teaching for a corporate school called School of Rock for 18 years now.
Oh yeah, I've heard about it.
I direct shows there. We just did an Alice show. We did Babies. We did Landslide. We did Long Way to Go. We did Condon Dream. Of course, we did 18, and we did a bunch of the what I just call newer Alice stuff as well. But I'm telling you, these kids really, I mean, they like Poison, and they like the late 80s Alice. They like those songs, but
nobody's perfect.
What are you gonna do, right? But these kids, we're talking about anywhere from 11 years old to 16 years old. They lit up when I showed them that 70s stuff. They really lit up. They're like, whoa. And they could not wait to learn how to, basically the magic of those songs, how to swing those parts, how to play those drum parts, how to play the bass line. Dunaway is like playing bass solos. He's playing bass solos in Schools Out. He's playing bass solo. That intro for Landslide is one of It's fucking amazing. Over just the sticks on the rim. Was that a rim shot you were doing just on the rims of a tom?
Probably just playing the rims,
Yeah. They love that kind of shit and how that all builds up, and they love that harmonica, bum, 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 a jun, jun, a jun, jun.
That's an influence from the old Yardbird
on that.
Stuff,
They were loving that little math problem. So these little things are influencing these literal kids that don't even have a favorite band, because the digital age has fucked that all up. They don't have a favorite record, they can't name a band. I like this one song. Who does it? They don't know the name of the art. It's terrible. But anyway, it was such a blast. Some of the kids wore the makeup and stuff, and they dressed up, and so fun. But it also is dangerous. Like on Babies, on $1 Billion Babies, the drummer, bless his heart, he was so happy that he got assigned that song because he got to overplay.
Yeah.
Because he's he's ad-libbing on your skeleton.
Yeah, well, I always say that I've tried to do two things in my career as a drummer. The first one, I'm happy when anybody gets what we do, but my biggest compliment, my biggest connection is if a drummer gives me a compliment. That's my number one biggest compliment. Yeah. And then the second one is it, like you're saying, it's not even somebody but now it's across decades, with the internet, which I hate the internet, but I love the fact of what it's done for music. And it exposes people to so many kinds of music. And the other thing is I've never wanted to look at myself or have somebody, I don't want to be a glorified metronome. Yeah. I want to actually play the drums. I'm a rudimentary drummer. I want to use my rudiments. And, there's something that I played on, I think it was the Ballad of Dwight Fry, when it breaks down and you just hear that stick just fall on the snare drum. Just nobody's ever done that ever. I call it a drop stick, and it's a rudiment that doesn't exist. Wow. But I made it up for that song, and even when I listened to it recently, and I'm going, man, it just works amazingly well on that. But you do enough drugs or beer. No, I'm only kidding. Boys and girls, I'm only kidding. But you just have to think out of the box a lot. And I really didn't want to be. I mean, I learned enough about music that I just didn't want to. And nothing. I mean, what Ringo does and what Charlie Watts does is great. And I think they're phenomenal drummers, because sometimes it's what you don't play versus what you do play. Yeah. And there's times when I have to pull back just to let the groove of the song. I still like to think of myself as a groove player, when that locks. And when Michael and Dennis and I play, there's still no 3-piece rhythm section. that locks like we do. And we've done it enough even in recent years that it still gives me a thrill. And it's one of my biggest blessings in music that I've had the chance to play with these guys.
Yeah.
Well, Alice was very, very lucky to have you guys. I think he
what a
knows
band.
that.
What a band.
So you guys are
Yeah.
a sick ass band.
And
it's
you know,
kind of
and
untouchable. There's no doubt in my mind that when you guys went on stage, musicians in the crowd were probably going, "What did I just see?"
yeah. Pound for pound, man for man, that was an unbeatable band. And I'll say also,
Amen.
besides the music, the look. I mean, look at the hair on the back of this.
No, that's the best. That's one of the best pictures of the band ever. And it was the photographer that set that up.
That's not only one of the I remember getting this album, of course, and I'm thinking, you know who the coolest looking guy on this picture is?
Yeah, me.
You.
This guy right here. And today I'm talking to him. Look at that.
That was the coolest hair band ever. We were a hair band before they existed. And also I want to point out in that album cover, I am the one not only was Kachina my snake on the Killer album, but the cane is my cane. And if you see it on the front cover too, and why do I have it? Everybody by now has heard about the hunting accident where Alice accidentally shot me.
No, I don't know this.
No.
You don't know this?
Shoot yourself in the foot.
So this isn't just a prop. This isn't a prop.
There was a time when we lived right before we changed the name to Alice Cooper. We were in Arizona in early 1968, and Alice and Mike Ant Boy Allen. The three of us went jackrabbit hunting out in the desert. Sat on our friend's car, drive through the desert like at 2 miles an hour at night with the lights on. And the jackrabbits, jump up and you can see their eyes glare, and then you shoot at them and you think you hit them and you don't because we're too drunk.
That's some redneck shit.
I thought I hit one. I ran out, and then boom! All of a sudden, Alice accidentally squeezed the trigger off. We're all sitting on the hood of the car. Oh, and that's the short story. It went in my ankle bone. It's still there to this day. And when I had the cast on, I wore a cane forever. I still have that cane here at home too.
Wow!
That was when I started. I mean, even when I had the cast off, until it was a hunt. It's never bothered me. Well, I can tell you when it's going to rain. That's about the only thing. Yeah. But I'm a good weatherman. But that's where the cane came from. Then, of course, and it's great. I mean, Alice, uses it on stage, and we use it with the Love It to Death. But and then even some of the pictures that he took, Love It to Death, he had the straight, more like the cane that was in the old, the dancers used back in the 30s movies and everything. So, but that first one on the Love It to Death album, that was mine, and the reason I still wore it and used it because it was kind of a habit with when I needed it, when I had the cast on.
Wow, yeah. I had no idea. I just thought that photo, every photo of the band from that era, you just look like the scariest, most dangerous, most rockin' band ever. And it's almost like if your hair wasn't down to your waist, you weren't allowed to be in the band. So is it true that Glenn Buxton used to carry a switchblade in his boot?
After schools, we all had switchblades. There was one time. Yes, so Glenn carried a switchblade that he almost stabbed Michael with one time. That's another story, but and that's a story that Michael told me. But basically 99% of the time we had a blast. I call it the party that never ended. But there was a time when I was talking about The Bodyguard, that when we played the Hollywood Bowl, when I had Kachina, we were in Phoenix, and we still had our driver's license. So I bought an antique 9mm German Luger. It was beautiful, wooden handled with a diamond grip on it, and a .22 Magnum Derringer and a .357 Magnum pistol, and that was brand new. The Magnum, the Derringer, and the Luger were old, and I kept them in the carpet bag that I kept Kachina in. I put a couple blankets over it, and she was in that. I walked right on the airplane with 3 pistols and a snake, and nobody ever looked her. And there was one picture that I saw one time. There's this lady, she's like 95 years old, sitting there right next to my carpet bag. If she ever knew what was in there, first of all, the snake, she would have had a heart attack. But anyway, so I wouldn't worry about Glenn as much as me in those days, because I mean, I knew the threats that were coming in, and again, eventually we had our bodyguard, but I had the opportunity to buy those, and then I took them back to Connecticut, and unfortunately, I lost those guns over time, but I was really into target practice, even though I was accidentally shot one time by my lead singer, but that's we just talked about.
Well, and that would have been when was the photo taken, in 69 or 70?
Which one? Love It to Death?
Love It to Death, when he's
Love It
using
to
the
Death.
cane.
That was probably early 71.
Oh, 71. Okay. Right.
So I was with the cast was well off by then, because that was when we still lived in Topanga Canyon.
Okay.
I couldn't even afford to go to a doctor, so I had this big Bowie knife and a hammer, and that's how I cut the cast off of my leg.
Wow.
Wow.
Crazy.
Well, so I don't even know why you guys needed a bodyguard. It sounds like you're armed to the teeth and ready to fight, man. I mean, geez.
Well, Glenn and I did get in a few fights one time, and believe me, we weren't the ones that lost. But it wasn't because of the weapons that we had. It was, just two guys from Akron. We weren't exactly hippies, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I always thought the photo on the back cover of Love It to Death was the coolest photo of a rock and roll band ever. Yeah. And you're the coolest looking guy in that photo.
Everyone, for a second there, when you look at that photo, you think that Neal is the singer.
I know, because he's front and center.
If you forget,
it's because his foot got shot by Alice.
Yeah, if you forget, who Alice is when you're looking at the photo, you would go, "Oh, that must be the singer." Wait, that's Neal. Never mind.
But I tell you, don't say but. But when we would go to the air, I would usually be, when we came through the airports as an entourage. This is before we had limos waiting beside our private planes. But when we used to fly into the airports, I was usually the head of the entourage, because once the Hare Krishna people were there, I yelled, "Get the fuck out of my way" to them. And at the top of my voice, it would echo through the airport. I would be in the front. And a lot of people would think that I was the singer of the band, that I was Alice. Yeah. And people come up with album covers for me to sign them. I said, "No, that's him over there." Yeah. And so that mistake, until the band was really, really well known, and then nobody got confused who Alice was. So
right.
It wasn't that unusual. But we didn't. I mean, we were all best friends. It didn't matter, and we all loved what we were doing, and that's why when we decided to call one of it. We could have decided to call Glenn Alice. Then anybody could have been Alice in the band.
Right.
But it just made more sense. The lead singer was Alice. But anyway, any other questions, guys?
Yeah, one last quick one, if I may.
I've got a couple little things too.
Okay, I just wanted to know, after that run of classic albums, why did the band stop? Alice obviously went on with a solo career in a different band and whatnot, and I think the intention was for you guys to just take a break and come back. But what led to the falling out, and you guys never sort of?
Well, I'm not going to get into that too much, but we took the year off, and everybody agreed to get back together to do the next studio album after Muscle of Love, and Michael and Dennis and I had already gotten together to do that. Glenn was a little bit incapacitated because he didn't play anything on the Muscle of Love album. And he was, even though School's Out was his album 100%, by $1 Million Babies, the only thing he did was, smash a guitar on Sick Thing. So, he was suffering his own problems with the demons of rock and roll. Unfortunately, man, I love him. He's like my brother. I still miss him to this day and always will. But we were supposed to get together to do the next album. That's where the $1 Million Baby Band Battle Axe album came from. That was the roots of the song that we're putting together. And then Alice found success with Nightmare, and didn't want to kind of reneged on our deal. But at that point, the top of our career, I was not going to get in a lawsuit, even though it was talked about, because we all own the name. We all own the name Alice Cooper and the corporation. So, it worked out. And that's why, when we got inducted to the Hall of Fame, we all, we had been playing together. I think our first show we did was at Alice Cooperstown in Phoenix in the late 90s when he opened his club there. And then Glenn passed away, and we had a Glenn Buxton Memorial Weekend that we did there too at Cooperstown.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we were together, we were playing, and then 2010, Alice wanted to write some songs for the Welcome to My Nightmare album, the sequel, and we wrote 3 songs with the original band for that album.
Cool.
And then right after that, we were nominated for the Hall of Fame, and unbelievably, we made it on the first ballot. And so that's why we were always together. And Alice puts it perfectly. He said, in a marriage, there can be a really nasty divorce, or there can be an amicable separation. Mm-hmm. And he said, we never got a divorce. We were always friends forever. And we were just, we were too close. We went through too much. Motherfucker shot me. I'm not, you can't get much more of a blood brother than that. So, so he's like, really my, he and Glenn and I were probably eventually closest. We shared rooms together, destroyed many hotels and people's lives and dreams. But we had a great time. So hopefully that in there somewhere that answered the question. And that's why, we've had songs on the last 3 Alice albums, his solo albums. And who knows, maybe someday we'll do an album completely on our own, the original band.
Happy to hear.
I would love that. I just wanted to, and maybe we can end with this, and then Dave will take us out. Touching back to something that Dave did say, it was a very short time when you think about the Zappa days and the, pre-Shep kind of a thing, and you have those 2 records, and then you go all the way through Muscle of Love with that, that was a very short blast of time, like a flash, where this band of crazies who were amazing.
To me, that's a compliment.
Yes.
It was intended as one.
I wasn't even done yet, and I'm complimenting you. Amazing musicians in their own right, and can play any style, and who mesh together. And as you put, were best friends and blood brothers, and did everything together, and destroyed and created all in one dream come true, and seemingly would go together everywhere, the Canary Islands and Detroit and Topanga and the Bay Area and Phoenix again and everywhere, all together as a group, and create this flash in time that I own it all. It's in my record collection. It's part of my DNA. The first ballot, more deserving than just a Hall of Fame. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that's amazing that you guys are in there, but I say fuck a Hall of Fame. I got my own Hall of Fame, and you guys were in it the whole fucking time, is the point that I'm making. Rock fans know it's not like a board of directors where they're all looking at spreadsheets and go, well, these guys did this, and maybe we should put them. Fuck all that. Yeah. So it's just been an amazing evening talking to you today and hearing these stories. And I just want to, before Dave takes us out, thank you very much for this. And I'm just making the point that you guys did it in like zip. It was that fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those 5, 7 records, whatever it is. I failed math class. Dropped out too, just so I could play rock and roll. And thank you, Neal. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it, man. And it's, over the years and hearing people, the different stories and how we touch people still amazes me. And that's why when I got that Hall of Fame award, I thank the fans, because believe me, without them, we would have been nothing. And even though everybody was so down on us, all the major record companies, the organic, original Alice Cooper, the group, people got it. And what we tried to convey, there was an audience for it, and a massive audience. And we're very thankful for that. We're cocky, we're badass, but we understand where it all comes from. And I appreciate your acknowledgement of that too, Jason. It's very cool.
Let me just second that, and I'll let you go, Neal. As Jason said, short amount of time, gave us a bunch of classic records that we still listen to this day. I held up a few during this conversation today. We thank you for the music, the memories, and thank you for your time today. I mean, what a pleasure. You're one of our heroes, and we're just thrilled that you were willing to be on our show today. So thank you for all that. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner with the legendary Neal Smith on the Talk Louder podcast.